Good afternoon, my name is Brandon, and like you, I am a tea enthusiast. I love learning more and more about tea, and I like to help out where I can. So I will be your guide to these videos and tea tours that we are going to provide you with. So today, before we get deeper and deeper into the world of tea and into some more specifics about how to make tea and the different kinds of tea, the first thing we want to do today is we want to give you an overview of Wu-Yi Star as a company. What kind of things we do, what kind of programs we're involved in, and specifically why this program has been strategized for you to share this tea with you. So let's go ahead and begin. So the first question that anybody would ask is, what do you think of tea? Think about it for a minute. Maybe you have this vision of a tea garden with rows of tea plants canvassing the mountain, maybe some clouds coming down through the valleys, rain, the smell of rain, this kind of thing. It's one of the things you may think of is the tea garden itself, right? And then, of course, you might think about drinking tea, right? Sitting down on a cool day, drinking a nice warm cup of tea, getting that relaxing feeling that comes from the process of pouring tea and just the overall drink of tea itself. Mostly this is, these are the images that will come to your mind when you think about what is tea. Of course, it's not only the tea fields itself and the process of drinking tea. It's much more than that. And that's the purpose of why we are doing this course. What else is there involved in this world of tea that we are interested in? So, here we see a picture of what the tea road looked like historically in China. You have the mules and the horses transporting tea all over China and into neighboring countries, up to the north, out to the west, and even eventually being sent over the oceans in boats, right? And here we see a map of China, and we see the areas where tea is grown in China. Now, you can see there's some slightly different colors here. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about moisture, we're talking about climate. Different teas grow in different areas. That's the point of this. So we've got history, we've got geography. An overview of Wu-Yi Star. This is the building that we are in right now. And let's see. Wu-Yi Star was established in 2001, okay? And they're involved in a lot of different things. You've got agriculture, you've got industry, okay? You've got enterprise, tea cultivation, okay? So cultivating the tea, production and processing the teas, sales, of course. We want to get our teas out into the world. But what sets Wu-Yi Star apart is we also do things like scientific research, tea tours for guests, and of course, spreading tea culture to those who want to learn more about it. A few things here is Wu-Yi Star is among the leading tea companies in China. Next one here, is it's a member of the National Standard of Tea. Okay, that's a very important thing in the tea world in China. And the best brand within Wu-Yi Rock Tea in this city of Wuyishan, there is not a single person that does not know this brand. We will discuss the reasons why a little bit later in this presentation. And of course, Da Hong Pao, you might know it as Big Red Robe. Wu-Yi Star is the #1 seller of Da Hong Pao, the most famous, the most reputable seller of Da Hong Pao in the world. Okay, and of course, there's a very large tea garden to grow all of these teas. Let's continue. Why is Wu Yi Star important? What sets Wu Yi Star apart from other tea companies in China? This is really one of the fundamental questions about Wu Yi Star, because this has to do with the vision, okay? The vision of what is Wu Yi Star as it went all the way back to its beginning. You know, what is Wu Yi Star? What is Wu Yi Star all about? Well, let's look at the key word here, sustainable, okay? Sustainable. You don't just want to grow your tea and make a bunch of money and, you know, produce a product that is not a quality and sustainable product. Now, it's not only the product itself, it's also the whole world of tea. The information that you get about tea, the progress of the industry, and of course, a focus on the culture that tea represents. This is all connected to the original vision of what Wu Yi Star is as a company. So here we have the 4 specifics of our scientific platform. Okay, these are 4 things that are very important. 1, this is the largest contiguous oolong tea garden in Asia. It is over 130 acres. Okay, and we already said that it's a sustainable garden, right? So, you know, the point with this huge garden is, you know, we want to contribute to the world of tea. And also there's an element of social responsibility. Making sure that what you present to the world about tea is something that you can be proud of. Again, this is the original vision of Wu Yi Star not only being about a profit-making business. Next one. This may be a new word for some of you. This was a new word for me. Germplasm. Germplasm, when we're talking about that, we're talking about the genetic code, right? The information that is found in tea. So over here you can see the germplasm resource tea garden. So all of these rows of tea, well, not all of them, but sections of this tea garden are different kinds of tea. And here, Wu Yi Star has collected 370 kinds of tea. Okay, now this is of course a very involved process, because we're taking teas from all over China and making sure that the conditions are right to grow them here also. So it's a pretty cool thing. And over 3,000 kinds of different germplasm resources. Remember, when we say germplasm, we're talking about the genetic code, the different varieties that grow in different circumstances. And of course, you know, in this kind of biological diversity, certain kinds of tea are better for different varieties of tea. So some teas might be better for white tea, some teas might be better for oolong tea, green tea, dark tea, black tea, and this is some of the information that we will get to in later classes. Next, the tea garden near the original Da Hong Pao tea bush, the original big red robe tea bush. Now, what's interesting about Wu Yishan is all of the tea bushes that grow here come from these original bushes. Cloning seeds, you know, and then recultivating, spreading these teas all around to different tea mountains throughout this area. And finally, here we are, the first tea research institute in China, founded in 1937, collecting 180 plus tea varieties. Now, when we talk about these tea varieties, we're talking about local tea varieties. And we're not talking about the processing method and the final product, we're talking about the plants themselves. Okay? So 180 plus plants, varieties of these plants that grew in this area. Now, you'll see here that this is 1937, and Wu Star was not created until the 2000s, but Wu Star was able to acquire this tea institute, and now this is the headquarters of this tea institute. Okay, let's continue. Sorry, I need to say one more thing about that. Is throughout history, this research institute has been the seat for famous tea researchers, famous tea scientists, and specifically tea masters, those who are skilled in actually creating the different kinds of teas and the different varieties. Let's go on. Okay, so now let's talk about the different organizations that Wu Star is connected with. Now, these institutions are all existing in China, okay, but it's very important for the reputation of a company if they are able to partner with these organizations, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the first one is the workstation of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Now, these people that work for this organization, they are specialized in the research and development of tea gardens, and specifically doing it in a way that's ecological. You know, another word that we might use would be, organic tea gardens, sustainable tea gardens. The point is a garden that is a place that is growing, that is thriving, that is not being polluted, right? And a garden that exists in a way that can protect the ecosystem and the environment around the tea garden. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that the Chinese Academy of Sciences study in depth. Research and demonstration site. Okay, so we do research here and we demonstrate certain standards here for the State Laboratory of Ecological Pest Control in Fujian Province and Taiwan. So focused on tea bushes in Taiwan and Fujian. Of course, if you look at a map, Fujian is right over the water from Taiwan, and they even share a common language. But the point is that we're talking about the flora and the fauna. When we say flora, we're talking about the plants. When we say fauna, we're talking about the animals. So the responsibility of this organization is to record the wildlife that exists in the garden. Okay? You can see here we have a picture of a spider, right? A picture of a bird, and other things that you can study are what kinds of plants can be grown in the tea garden that also benefit the soil, benefit the cultivation and the growing of tea. So that is what this is all about. Okay, let's move on to the conservation and use of tea genetic resources. We're talking about the genes, the genetic code, right? The biodiversity. What's this? Well, what you see here is tea seeds being planted, and being planted in a way that different tea varieties will cross-pollinate and create a new hybrid, a new tea that has not existed before. Okay, so that's what you see in this picture here. So you've got artificial hybrid breeding, okay? So putting different plants together in a way that they'll come up with a new hybrid. Seed picking and collection. Of course, tea seeds are very important in any tea garden. Even though you can clone a existing plant, if you want to come up with a new variety, right? How do you do that? When the cross-pollination happens, is the seeds create a new variety. So without the seeds, you can't crossbreed. And then, of course, testing those seeds, testing the plants that come from that process. What is unique about this new hybrid that has been created? And then beyond that is testing, what kinds of teas, what can we do with this new genetic resource? Okay? Fundamental services for tea cultivation, we're talking about the soil, we're talking about the air, we're talking about the climate. These things are all very important to the final product of tea, right? So you would have the testing of the soil. You want to know, you want to make sure that there are no pollutants in the soil. Of course, you don't want polluted tea, right? If there's pollutants in the soil, you'll get pollutants in the tea that you drink, and that will come into your own body, right? But then we're also talking about the air. Are there pollutants in the air? And if there are pollutants in the rain, or in the air, when it rains, will those pollutants go into the soil? So these are other kinds of testing that this organization will do. And of course, any other scientific research projects that happen in the garden can be assisted by this in this way. Okay, so Wu Star is also a member of the National Technical Committee on Tea Standardization and Administration of China. What does this mean? Well, in any industry, you want to create standards so that you know that the product is a good product, right? Especially if I don't know tea very well. Maybe I know, oh yeah, I tried this tea and I liked it, or I don't know, I only know green tea. Well, how can I be certain that if I buy this tea, or I share this tea with my mother whom I love, that I know that that is a good quality of tea? Well, of course, it's setting up standards. And to meet these standards, it is a very rigorous process, okay? Because there are so many different requirements for each kind of tea, all right? Now, what's cool about Wu Star is Wu Star, of course, their teas apply to these standards, but also Wu Star worked with other tea companies, other very famous tea companies and very excellent tea companies in China to help create these standards. Okay, and of course the point there is the protection of the customer, making sure that the customer knows that this is a reliable product. Okay, so we're talking about everything from different kinds of tea to even how you store the tea, what kind of tea bags you put the tea in, what kind of containers hold the tea. All these different processes and standards are very, very important to protect the quality of the tea and to protect the consumer. Okay, very good. Let's continue. Okay, now let's talk about, beyond just the world of processing tea, creating tea, learning about tea, and drinking tea, what other things can be done with tea? Well, Wu Star is also very involved in artisan, meaning, creating new things, right? Artisan tea culture. Let's look at a few examples. Of course, the first fundamental basic is how to brew tea. Different people in different countries do it different ways. Different cultures have different processing methods and different brewing methods, right? So the first thing that we focus on is, how to brew tea in a very traditional Chinese way, being that what's produced here is Chinese tea. Now, of course, oolong tea and black tea, there's a little bit of regional differences in China as well on different methods for brewing tea, and of course we want to learn all of that. The temperature that different teas like, does this tea like boiling or less than boiling water? This is all involved in, learning how to brew different kinds of tea. This is a class that is offered here at Wu Star, and it's combining tea, flowers, and incense. So this is a very hands-on class where you consider the different smells, the different aromas that might complement the tea that you're drinking, and you can see here the creation of incense that you can burn in a room to increase the relaxed atmosphere that is in the room while you're drinking the tea. Okay, so It's also ancient methods, okay? How has incense been made traditionally, okay? And of course, the flowers and the tea, how to combine the different fragrances. Okay, tea soap. What? Tea soap? Yes, tea soap. You can see here that different kinds of tea have different sized leaves, right? And of course, inside the tea itself, inside the tea leaves have different levels of different tannins, different chemical compounds that are created. And the research has shown that natural theanine being one kind of tannin that is present in tea leaves, it helps repair damage that is caused by the sun, by the sun's ultraviolet rays, okay, radiation from the sun. And then EGCG, it's another kind of tannin. If you look this up online, you'll see it's a very long word. Okay, so we just say EGCG for short. And this is also an antioxidizing, it's an antioxidant that is present in this tea soap. So creating tea soap, how can tea benefit your skin, right? All right, qualifications and certifications. This is another aspect of training that happens here at Louis Star, is getting to know tea performances. We hope to give you examples of these in the future, tea performances, and making sure that people are able to understand, identify, and taste the 6 different kinds of tea that are present in China. And of course, we'll get into more detail in future videos. At the end, it says 2 original tea cultivars. I had to look this up on the internet myself to learn what is a cultivar. Well, when we talk about cultivar, we talk about the very, very origins of the tea bush. And I learned that there are 2 cultivars, meaning that tea grew in this world naturally in 2 places. One is India, the other is China. Okay, so these 2 original kinds of tea bushes became the thousands of different varieties of tea that we can now find and purchase and drink and enjoy today. Okay, the National Standard Sensory and the CNAS laboratory. The point here, the key word in this sentence is sensory. Okay, so firstly, what we're talking about in this slide is we're talking about your senses. How does the tea smell, right? When you look at the tea, what does the tea look like? What is the color, right? What does it look like? Is it clear? These kinds of things. And then, of course, finally, flavor. And, when you're doing this kind of thing, just from drinking it, you're looking for new flavors. What are the flavors that you taste in the tea? And of course, we will talk about this much more as we continue in the future. Hundreds of flavors, which come from different tea varieties and processing methods. It also reflects the environment in which the tea is grown and, how that tea is cultivated and processed. And of course, you want to look at how it looks, how the tea water, how it mixes together, what it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, as I've already said. You can find all different kinds of flavors in tea. You can find fresh flavors, bitter flavors in some kinds of tea, sweet flavors, and brisk, refreshing flavors. So on the one hand, we have the senses, but then on the other hand, there are also very rigorous testing methods. Okay, now this is scientific testing. What's the point? Okay, of course, tea is not only about your senses. Okay, when you test the tea, the first thing you want to look for is, like we said before, pollutants. Are there any pollutants in that soil, in that air? Of course, if there are any pollutants, you can no longer say that that is an ecological and organic tea garden, right? So being able to test the soil and test the air to make sure that there are none of these pollutants is the essential building block for being able to say that this is an organic tea garden, right? But we're not only testing for pollutants, we're also testing for ingredients like tannins, okay? Tannins are basically chemical compounds that exist naturally in tea and have different kind of health benefits. Like we talked about earlier in a couple of slides, previous slides, we talked about theanine being one, okay, that benefits your skin. These are what we refer to as tannins. And finally, when you store a tea, your tea can change over time. So, in this kind of laboratory, it's important to send the tea to get tested, but then after it's stored, send it to get tested again. What's the outcome? Well, if you test your tea that has been stored, you can learn a lot about if your storage facility is appropriate, right? If it's not moist enough, if it's not cold enough, if it's too cold, if it's too moist. All of these questions can be answered through this kind of scientific testing. So it's not only the sensory aspect, it's also very specific scientific testing. Let's continue. Okay. Wu Star even created different cards to represent different flavors that you may find in tea, right? So as you're tasting the tea, oh, this one has a kind of coconut flavor, or this one reminds me of coffee. Oh, this one tastes a little bit like lemon. It's a little bit sour, right? So identifying the different flavors and aromas that you find in the tea are one of the most interesting and fun aspects of drinking tea. You know, what do you taste? Okay, now let's get into our global tea activities. And it's here that we really get to the point of why we have created these classes, okay? Because for Wu Star, it's about exchange. It's about knowledge, and it's about growing. It's about improving the atmosphere of tea, not only in China, but throughout the world. All right, so in 2013, Wu Star launched the Global Tea Tasting activity because, of course, if you want to learn about tea, you can read all the books you want. You can read all the scientific journals and papers that you want. You can look at every web page on the internet that has to do with tea, but until you taste the tea, you can never really know it. So this activity was established in order to give people access to simply coming and tasting tea. Now you can see that this has been held in several countries since 2013, such as South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, France, among others, and, you know, continuing in the future as well. Global tea culture communication. This is another aspect of the foreign exchange. Learning about tea. It's one, explaining different kinds of Chinese tea, and of course here at Wu Star, we specialize in oolong tea, a special kind of oolong tea called rock tea, which we'll discuss more in the future, and black tea, but even white tea, because white tea is very important in this region of China. But also learning about the tea culture from other countries, okay? This kind of exchange. So as Chinese tea goes out, information about other teas also come in, okay? It's a reciprocal process. It goes both ways. And the point is the global spread of Chinese tea culture, as well as learning about different teas from different countries, okay? So like I said, an exchange. Okay, tea tours. This is another important part of the organization here, is actually showing, not only drinking the tea, but showing where it's grown, right? And tea lovers from all over the world are welcome to come here. and try the tea and get involved in these different kind of classes and different ways of disseminating information about tea. Learn about tea, how to process tea. One of the most fun things that I've done with Wu Yi Star was actually picking tea. When the buds were coming out of the top of the tea bushes deep in the mountains, we went out into the mountains and we picked tea. And it was super fun. Okay, so, learning about the different teas, tasting the different teas, and getting to know the world of tea, specifically here in Wuyishan. Tea processing. Oh, here it is. This is the place where I went when we did the tea picking. So based on processing methods, this is how you get your different aspects of tea. So let's look at these one by one, okay? Because there's a process, a linear process that tea goes through. So starting with green tea, which is not fermented, and then white and yellow teas, which are lightly fermented, very little bit of fermentation goes on. Oolong tea is semi-fermented, black tea is fully fermented, and dark tea is post-fermented. So you see that in Chinese tea, you get the whole spectrum of non-fermented tea to post-fermented tea. It's okay if you don't know what that means today. That is what we're going to discuss in the future. Just keep these things in mind, that when you're talking about different kinds of tea, one of the main things that you're going to be thinking about is what level of fermentation this kind of tea has gone through. Okay, and of course, Wu Yi Star has won many awards, such as the first prize in the World Tea Championship and the Perfect Attendance Award at the Tea Expo in Milan, Italy. Okay, here we go again about the exchange. We've got cross-cultural studies in tea. So the point here is this word, conservation. Okay, when we talk about conservation, we talk about protecting the tea itself and the whole culture that the tea comes with. So creating a global strategy for how we are going to protect tea and the use of tea genetic resources. When we're talking about the genetic code and the hybrids, how are we going to protect these for not only for our own consumption, but for future generations and for the good of the environment. And a vast project on the comparison between China, representing Asia, and Kenya, representing Africa, dealing with the ecological services for birds in the tea garden. So this is a very focused project that is, actually you can see here, they will collect birds, study them, not harm them of course, and learn about how the birds are existing in the tea garden and what role they play in this ecosystem that is the tea garden. And finally, environmentally friendly. The study of environmentally friendly ecological pesticides. Okay? Because some insects and other organisms damage your tea when it's being grown. Right? So you want to make sure that you have some pesticides that are ecologically friendly. Okay? They don't damage the environment, they don't damage the tea itself, and they don't damage the person that is going to drink that tea. Okay, so these are all parts of the cross-country studies. And this study here is with the University of Greenwich in the UK and Fujian, this province, Fujian Agriculture and Forestry University. Okay, so you can see that Wu Yi Star is involved in all kinds of different things. Not just drinking tea and growing tea, but also what you can do with tea, artisan ideas, and very rigorous testing and scientific studies. Okay, and that comes to the point of this volunteer program, is to make sure that people have access to this information about tea.
not only what is tea, how does it taste, but how can we protect tea and the world of tea and the culture that is involved with tea going on in the future. And of course, that is why we established this online course, because we know that right now, not many people are traveling all over the world. World travel is limited at this time, and so within this constraint, WooEstar decided to just try it out online. Maybe we can get that information out in an online digital forum. Okay, so we provide the internship, the tea training, and other tea activities. Of course, if you have any questions, you can contact us, and we are very happy to get to know you. We're very happy to teach you about tea, and we value your participation. Thank you very much.